tonight we are joined by Robert Snyder, author and founder of Innovation Elegance. Robert has over 30 years of project and change management experience under his belt, and he has had a diverse set of roles across both corporate and consulting, and he's the founder and president at Innovation Elegance LLC with the primary aim of solving VUCA. One of Robert's aims is to make healthy change and innovation straightforward and inevitable, and he believes that we need to innovate how we innovate, which I love that. Robert, thank you for accepting my invitation and to coming along in this career session, and I'm very pleased to welcome you. Would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Okay, sure. My name is Robert Snyder. I'm currently in London by way of Chicago. I'm loving my time in London. And the reason I do so much public speaking and writing is that I believe that the status quo for innovation professionals, so that includes business analysts, change managers, project managers, and their adjacent professions, I believe that the current frameworks and expectations in the culture are mostly just absolutely unacceptable. And we have metaphors. We have positive role models to aspire to adopt. And the good news is that changing how we change, while culture change is painful, it's painful to the untrustworthy and the incompetent. For those of us who are competent and acting in good faith for our companies, the transitions are absolutely possible. They're straightforward, they're fun, they're familiar, and they're very financially attractive. So I believe that solving VUCA and converting from VUCA to what I call elegance is absolutely a worthwhile pursuit.
Thank you. What I would love to kick off our conversation with is innovation elegance. You've mentioned terms such as communication jams, VUCA, and empathy many times in your books, talks, and speeches. Are those what inspired the creation of Innovation Elegance?
So when you say the creation, I think back to the origin story of what was going on in my career, 2017, 2018, 2019. The origins of my of writing the book was simply, I felt that companies were starting to ignore more and more valuable documentation. Documentation was falling out of favor, and I wanted to write a book to raise the glamour and raise the gravity of healthy documentation. At the same time, because of my performing arts background, I felt that many companies are just missing out on the benefits, the cultural and the financial benefits of imitating the performing arts. So as of 2018, 2019, that's really my vision, was to raise the glamour of documentation, raise the glamour of meetings, and help teams envision imitating a symphony, imitating a dance couple, that sort of thing. Back in 2018, 2019, I didn't imagine confronting agile or confronting what I call the agile hybrid stalemate, but through the editing process, my editors kept challenging me. And so that's where the books and my public speaking have ended up, where I am blatantly, formally confronting these communication traffic jams. I'm confronting the agile hybrid stalemate. I'm formalizing that we don't settle for these low expectations. Let's not surrender to VUCA. And so that's why my material is so, it's audacious. I acknowledge it, but I'm not going to apologize for it. Teamwork is worth it. We are worth it. Our careers are worth it. Project success is worth it. To not be complacent with VUCA.
You just mentioned documents and meetings, and these are two things that take a lot of time and probably what, in a sense, create that communication jam. Talking from a project management point of view, that lots of professionals waste a lot of time in meetings, in documenting things, in back-to-back emails and everything. So would you mind elaborating a little bit on this? How can we have them both and not waste so much time?
Yeah. So let's first, let's see, conceptually, I believe that many teams have in their front seat meetings, meeting minutes, meeting gridlock, emails. And this is what I call the infinite activity, because just how many meetings would you need to call that project successful? How many emails would you need to call that project successful? That's an unanswerable question. That's what I call the infinite activity. Meetings and emails are wonderful servants. They are horrible masters. So there's a lot of conversation. There are many conversations right now about, quote, fixing meetings, even going to a 4-day work week and this sort of thing. And I discourage that. I just think that anything like a 4-day work week is a secondary, tertiary, fourth order culture fix. So I believe that's off the mark. But what I do think, what I want companies and teams to consider is what I'll call switching seats. Again, that concept of meetings and emails being the servant, they're in the back seat. What's in the front seat? Well, instead of infinite activity, I'll call it finite productivity. It's an important skill and it's a sign of maturity for a team to be able to distinguish what is activity, what is just being busy, whether it's contributing to productivity or not, versus what is the finite productivity. Are we a team that's mature enough that we have a firm grasp of, well, what does success look like? Is it these 10 things? Is it these 50 things? Is it these 70 things? And every time we do a lessons learned exercise, well, those 70 things, the finite productivity, and we absolutely can put a number, right? When I say the word finite, you should be able to immediately challenge me to say, well, if it's finite, I want to see the math. And so it's pretty detailed for a half-hour conversation, Mina, but we could get into what is the math behind this notion of finite productivity. And so what I'm encouraging teams to do, back to your concept, the theme of your question is about waste. To minimize waste, in our front seat must be finite productivity. What's in the back seat is infinite activity. Now, your question also talked about, how do we treat meetings and how do we treat documentation? Let's talk about the cost profile of each of those communication channels. Why are meetings? Why is the addiction to meetings understandable? It's low upfront cost. And this bar chart that I'm going to try to describe, we can put it in the comments of the event later, just so folks have a visual. But for purpose of this conversation, let me do my best to describe these bar charts and the cost profile of meetings and the cost profile of documentation. So again, why are meetings? Why is the addiction to meetings understandable? It's just cheap and easy. It's low upfront cost to shape a culture of meetings. However, as the scale of communication, as the traffic increases, why do we get frustrated with meetings? Well, at high volume, it's high marginal cost. And this is what I mean by communication traffic jams. And we'll casually hear people say things like, my workday is back to back to back to back to back to back to back meetings. And I can't get to the quote real work until after 5 o'clock. Well, then I would ask the question, well, what is that real work? Because some people have gone home. So does that mean it's just emails? So that's the cost profile of meetings. Low upfront cost, high marginal cost. That's not scalable, right? Because when you have a colleague miss a meeting, well, then you have to have another meeting. So this is not scalable communication. This is not scalable expectation setting. And the money term is high marginal cost. Okay, so now let's talk about the cost profile of documentation. Why is creating documentation so unpopular? It's high marginal cost. So it's completely understandable when people grumble and groan and roll their eyes at documentation, completely understandable, because creating documentation has high marginal cost. Why do we even do it? It's because down the road, X number of days, weeks, and months in the future, recalling that information, sharing the information, changing our mind. Now we've reduced the marginal cost to do all those things. So even meeting minutes, as much as I discourage meeting minutes is a tacit acknowledgement that, you know what, the upfront cost of meeting minutes might be worthwhile. Why? To reduce the marginal cost of recalling later what we discussed, because someone missed a meeting, we're going to need to remember, that sort of thing. So what I'm trying to do is exaggerate low marginal cost even more beyond meeting minutes. Meeting minutes are just a CYA. That's not discipline. That's not empathy. Meeting minutes depreciate. But I'm just giving that as a familiar example because many of us at least are willing to do meeting minutes. I think it's still that's still mediocre work, and we should hold ourselves to a higher standard to really strive for scalability and low marginal cost and be unapologetic about scale. And we could get into examples. I'll try to pause here momentarily, Mina, but we can think of so many examples in life where scalability is so critical because of high traffic volumes. Think of the train system in any city. Think of the upfront cost of the London tube system. Think of the low marginal cost. We could think about name tags at a conference. In a conference of 5 people, name tags are overkill. But as soon as the communication traffic volume can justify name tags, well, name tags are high upfront cost. Why do we do it? Low marginal cost. And so all of business, it's about profit. It's about low marginal cost. So instead of being obsessed with speed or frequency, I would like to see us obsessed with low marginal cost.
What signals tell you that empathy is improving decisions rather than just making them slower?
There's a few different directions I can take this question. I'm rereading Manoj's question here. Signals and resilience. Imperfection. When leaders have sufficient humility, they're not only going to ask the questions that progress people, process, technology, stuff that you'd put in a project plan, but leaders signal resilience, humility, and listening by certain frameworks. And again, to try to come up with one succinct example, in my second book, on my website, and in many of my LinkedIn posts, I present a framework that's called I like, I wish, I hope, I wonder. Again, I like, I wish, I hope, I wonder. This is a weekly framework as an appendage to your weekly individual status report that memorializes all your contributions for that week. And so in my organizations, I don't mandate that my team members finish those sentences every week, but I do mandate that they consider and they reflect on those 4 sentences every week. If you have a compliment to give, finish the sentence, I like. If there's something in the recent past that might be gnawing at you, finish the sentence, I wish. If there's something in the near future that feels at risk, finish the sentence, I hope. And if you have a politically delicate or innocent question, finish the sentence, I wonder. For example, my favorite is, I wonder if we have a product owner. That would be a big exposure of a leadership void, right? So that's just one example. And I'll look at Manoj's question again to see if there's a second way I'd like to respond. But we cannot leave resilience and discipline and empathy to chance. If we leave those culture traits to chance, we are relying on the people who are there. Good leaders, bad leaders come and go. We also cannot just rely on meetings. So I have formulated certain templates that don't leave resilience to chance. They don't leave trustworthiness to chance. So it is trying to codify high discipline, high empathy, high trustworthiness, so that we don't have to rely on heroes and just, getting lucky with the people we work with. I don't want to be lucky. I want to make success inevitable. I want to make trustworthiness inevitable. So these templates I hope they feel simple and administrative, and that is the whole point. But the templates are, I'm going to quote W. Clement Stone, small hinges swing large doors of culture change. I added that last part myself. Small hinges, such as templates, swing large, these are small hinges that swing large doors of culture change. So it is culture disguised as a template. Back to Manoj's question about resilience. We don't need to expect perfection, but we can develop habits that gradually over time make us more inevitably successful because we know what good collaboration looks like. So I believe in templates because it helps standardize high discipline and high empathy.
You were talking about resilience in teams and, creating that culture. That reminds me of another thing that I've heard, I've listened to in your talks and, in your speeches, which was you mentioned that as project professionals, we work with so many different people, and an executive's job is to meet every person where they are, whereas not to expect them to meet, for example, me where I am. So, how can we do that? And how can we adapt as project professionals? Because, for example, let's see a project manager works with so many different people with different backgrounds, different cultures, different working styles, and communication styles. How can one adapt to all these and kind of balance and control this whole dynamic?
So in a word, it's simplify. I believe many teams are continually reinventing the wheel. They treat every project as if it is 200% unique. If every project has nothing in common with every previous project, then why would you even hold a lessons learned exercise? What is expertise when everything is completely new? So it's irresponsible and it's lazy to say every project is different. So I love to play a game. I'm gonna get really narrow with this idea of variety, variance, variability in a project team. And I call this game, what are the chances? And this picks on the U of the acronym VUCA, right? VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And so when someone says, "Oh, well, everything is so different and everyone is coming from such," well, okay, let's simplify and let's start asking questions like, what are the chances that a project is going to impact a process or that a process flow is worthwhile in documenting? The chances are pretty high. What are the chances that the data structure is going to be changed by a project? Pretty high. What are the chances that code is involved? Pretty high. What are the chances that a training effort is going to be valuable? Pretty high. What are the chances that we should put training materials on paper to reduce the marginal cost of training the users on this new? Pretty high. So this obviousness theme, we can keep asking ourselves, what is obvious? What is obvious? Meetings are not at risk. We're going to talk. What's at risk is, are we creating the right documentation, the right keystrokes, the right assignments, so that we are generating robust agreements, expectations with integrity. And so I'm trying to go back to your question, the theme of complexity and just the high variability. I mean, was that kind of the essence of your question, is that in a team of 20, 30, 40 people, the variability of skills and backgrounds and expectations and biases and self-esteem, I mean, it's all over the place. So to maximize the chance of success, leaders must simplify, simplify, simplify. Don't boil the ocean. Have boundaries. Establish boundaries for individuals, establish boundaries for the team. Don't boil the ocean. Keep your expectations modest and know what small wins look like.
Yeah, I think that that answers that to a large extent. It's am I understanding this correctly if I say that we're not supposed to be chameleons? We're supposed to understand and set the guardrails and kind of guide through that, and also to be able to kind of meet everyone at the level that they are and tune the expectations based on that. Is that the right kind of understanding of it?
I like where you're going. So that's a great term, chameleon. I'm trying to imagine in front of me a symphony, and there are times where I'm serving as the synchronization point, right? The organizer, the synchronizer of this orchestra. I'm going to meet the clarinet player where they are, and I'm going to ask, what do you need from me to make your job easier? The clarinet player has a big enough job and they're worried about themselves. I'm not going to ask them to meet me where I am. As a servant leader, I'm going to do my best to maximize the chance for their success, their individual success. I'm going to do the same thing with the saxophone player, the drum player, etc. So in the world of innovation, again, change managers, project managers, business analysts, I'm going to meet the followers where they are. I'm going to listen first. What's working for you? What's not working for you? I like, I wish, I hope, I wonder. It's important for leaders to listen first, to understand what do members of the ensemble need so that they feel safe, productive, confident, happy to be there, engaged, attentive. I don't want them to miss their cue. If I can simplify their environment, I'm going to raise the confidence of their success, the chance of their success. But if I lack the skills as a leader, if I lack the skills to simplify, then I set my teams up for failure. To be able to work in complexity is a skill. You know what's also a skill? Reducing complexity. It's a skill to be able to work within in an ambiguous environment. But you know what also is a skill? Reducing ambiguity. I can work in a VUCA environment. But you know what my secret power is? Reducing VUCA. Does that make sense?
It does. And talking about reducing complexity reminds me of what we talked about agile. Now, if I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about agile, but there was something with agile that kind of triggered the whole creation of Innovation Elegance. Am I right? So could you kind of talk about what was wrong with it and why it doesn't apply to the modern setting and the modern way of working that we do things and the projects that we work on?
Yeah. So Agile had a huge milestone in 2001 when those software developers published the Agile Manifesto. The Agile Manifesto made sense in 2001 as a response to what the web was in the mid and late 90s. It's 25 years later. So I understand what they were trying to accomplish when it comes to frequency and the low complexity of what websites were in 2001, which back then we were using terms like brochureware, splash page, right? The complexity of websites back then, a lot of the web was a glorified PDF because restaurants or small businesses wanted to just upgrade their website every 2 weeks. That frequency and the notion of a sprint totally makes sense for 2001. So if you comb through the Agile Manifesto, it formally states that the primary measure of progress is working software. The dirty little secret about Agile is what makes innovation teamwork difficult. It's not the software, it's us. That shouldn't surprise anyone. So when I playfully wrote the Elegance Manifesto, what I did is I rewrote the Agile Manifesto in the style of the Agile Manifesto for this decade. And instead of emphasizing working software, I'm emphasizing a working team. Because In the immortal words of Patrick Lencioni, teamwork is the most powerful competitive advantage because teamwork is so powerful and it is so rare. None of us work in isolation. What makes teamwork difficult is the friction, the insecurity, the reinventing the wheel, the lack of clarity, right? The VUCA, the more VUCA you have in your team, you set yourself up for failure. And over the last 25 years, agile has evolved, right? Agile became less about frequency and more about speed. And then there was, the debate, well, it doesn't mean there's less documentation. So we could debate the axis. There's several axes that agile tried to take a stand on. First, it was frequency, then it was speed. Those are not the same thing. Then we could talk about documentation. We could talk about scope size. And then agile became more abstract. Like, well, agile, it's not something you do, it's something we are. It's a mindset. It's a vibe. Holy ambiguity, Batman. So agile has become this invincible bulletproof term that here in 2026, when I hear the word agile, all I hear is, I'm not rigid and get off my back. Now, from a software perspective, I think very rarely is a team completely waterfall. Very rarely is a team completely agile. So if I could generalize, I'm going to say, you know what? Everyone is just kind of hybrid. And it's kind of like this arbitrary, well, I don't even know what constitutes discipline anymore. In the agile hybrid stalemate that I see, I have lost track. What is discipline? I believe a strong proposal for discipline is low marginal cost. And this financial lens of agility, so instead of technological agility, we could talk about financial agility. I consider financial agility to be low marginal cost. But there's also this built-in hybrid, and we already kind of touched on it with this image of these bar charts. Anything that lacks scalability and infrastructure in our operations and in our cultures, in our teamwork, that is high marginal cost. And that's one side of this financial hybrid. And then there are other things in our businesses that we've automated the operations, or within our cultures, we have this rhythm and these routines and a culture, and that marginal cost. Those two cost profiles is a very natural hybrid, and it is an inevitable hybrid. We don't need another hybrid where waterfall and agile are saying, well, hybrid means this, it means this, it's speed, it's frequency, it's documentation, it's scope size, it's just this made up thing between two technology-oriented methodologies. And again, technology is not what makes teamwork difficult. Code is just one asset of that finite productivity that I mentioned earlier. I count like 60 things worth putting on paper, worth keystrokes, worth documenting, worth the 5 verbs of draft, review, revise, approve, distribute. Code is one of those 60 things. Think of how much work and collaboration is necessary and valuable upstream from code. Agile put us in a position where tech led the business. I believe we should have the business lead the business. And what is evidence of that is there are dozens of things upstream from code that are worth aligning on, setting expectations for a team well before we get to code. Code is very far downstream. It's necessary, of course, but the agile world has, the term agile has succeeded wildly more so than the constituents it purports to serve, which is all of us in innovation, because we are experiencing disengagement, fatigue, burnout, toxicity, hostility in the workplace. So agile or hybrid, neither of these things are solving those cultural problems. And what I'm trying to do with this body of work I call elegance is solve all the problems that no one asked agile to solve.
I think this question is a bit related, and Manoj is asking, what is the biggest leadership failure you see when teams mislabel a complex problem as complicated in VUCA environments?
Can that's awesome. Can you leave that question up? So because there's probably
Yeah,
two or three different ways. Okay,
of
so
course. Yeah.
leadership failure. So one leadership failure I see is that we uh, confuse climbership with leadership.
Mhm.
We have plenty of people out there who are looking up the corporate ladder. They're climbing, which means they're following. They're even stepping on other people. So just because someone is senior ranking, they don't deserve the positive halo of the word leader. They're clearly an executive, and I already know that they're a great climber. But whether they're a good leader or not, well, that depends on how they treat other people and how if they positively influence the value and the cultures of other people. So I believe that is one of the biggest failures of our cultures is that we do not strongly partition what constitutes a climber, what constitutes a leader. So another leadership failure, I've already touched on it, is the failure to simplify and the failure to be transparent. I'm going to steal a quote from Chris McChesney. Chris McChesney wrote a book called The Four Disciplines of Execution. And the quote I stole from him is, execution's two best friends are simplicity and transparency. Execution's two best friends are simplicity and transparency. Simplicity and transparency are the opposites of those last two letters of VUCA. So we have RACI frameworks, which shapes a culture of ambiguity because in a race governing with a RACI, I don't know what's worth documenting. There's no sense of sequence. There's no duration. There's no sense of closure. So a RACI shapes a culture of ambiguity. Also in a task list or project plan, you might have 30, 40, 50 different verbs. That's unnecessary complexity. So it's a leadership failure when executives shrug at simplicity and transparency. You know what? There's one other thing. Actually, if she's using the terms complex and complicated, I'm still not fully answering this question. Okay, so the way I have interpreted and distinguished complicated is that complicated means that the thing in front of you has multiple parts, numerous parts, but it's finite, it's solvable, and it's masterable. Complex, you have something in front of you which is more likely infinite. I love to use the example of raising a family or navigating a family. There are infinite combinations, infinite challenges that a family or raising children can face. And so just because she put in complicated and complex in that question, I felt the need to address, yeah, complicated, there's a lot of moving parts, but it's finite and you can master it. Where complex, the general understanding is that it can be infinite.
You mentioned RACI in your response, and um, am I right in saying that the five verbs that you have introduced are meant to bring something more to the table than what RACI does, or kind of replace it, if I may
Yeah.
say?
So I had both of them existing for maybe 10 or 15 years over the course of my career. I didn't feel the need to euthanize RACI until 5 years ago. So I was managing with both. Um, but let me describe one of the core problems I see with RACI. Many of us in our jobs, in our careers, have had experiences where we feel accountable. We feel accountable for something without having the corresponding authority. And that feels bad because it's like the expectations of us to get something done and influence people that don't report to us and they've got five other priorities. And it's a struggle. Like we're begging for people's time. And often we feel set up for failure when we're assigned accountability, but we don't have authority. And what this also means is the converse, that someone else evidently has authority without having accountability. I believe this sets individuals up for failure. It sets teams up for failure. And we are systematizing, we are guaranteeing this decoupling because the org chart says, here's the authority. But the org chart doesn't say anything about accountability. And then we've got the RACI matrix. It says, well, this is how we formally define accountability, but it doesn't define authority. So we're purposely decoupling these things. That is a recipe for failure, and it sets people up to fail. So the 5 verbs, right? So RACI is 4 adjectives. Been around a long time. Harbors a lot of ambiguity. With a RACI, I don't know what's worth documenting. What's just a chat? I don't have a sense of sequence, so it's impossible for me to sequence or synchronize anything that I'd govern with a RACI. And I don't have a sense of closure. What does done mean with a RACI? So, so the RACI should not be sacred. Anything we would govern with a RACI is going to involve 4 or more people. Anything that's going to involve 4 or more people is worth putting on paper. Anything that's worth putting on paper, documenting in a collaborative manner, is worth governing, not with adjectives, but with verbs that dictate and make it obvious, make it idiot-proof that we are going to put this stuff on paper. So the adjective, if I map RACI to the 5 verbs, responsible maps to the verb draft. Accountable maps to the verb approve. Consulted maps to the verbs review and revise. And the I, informed on the RACI, maps to distribute. So if I get the sequence right, I can now form a rhythm with those 5 verbs. Draft, review, revise, approve, distribute. Rinse, repeat. Draft, review, revise, approve, distribute. So the 5 verbs is a forcing function. It is a liberating structure. If anyone in the audience is not familiar with this concept of a liberating structure, that's worth exploring and researching. What does a liberating structure do, and why would we want it? There's a recent thought leader who taught me the phrase freedom within the frame. Freedom within the frame. I believe that is a very helpful construct to distinguish what is our common language, our mechanics, on and off the dance floor. We need common mechanics where we're speaking the same language, literally and figuratively, so we can communicate. But are we all androids and homogenous individuals with no variety? Of course not. So the freedom within the frame, let's not lose sight of it. So as an example, the fact that a team would do a process flow, would complete a process flow, that's not creative. But you know what's creative? What's inside the process flow. That's where the magic and the surprise and delight and the customer experience really shines through. That is the style and the empathy of the team. It's not creative to complete a project charter. What's creative and insightful and ingenious is what's inside the project charter. So it's really valuable to distinguish mechanics from style, discipline from empathy. A singer would say technique from expression. So I admit I feel like I'm down a rabbit hole, Mina. Save me from the rabbit hole and bring me back to
No,
the question.
I think it makes sense because oftentimes project managers or project professionals are known as people who have to be accountable without having the full authority. Whereas using these 5 verbs, I think that it gives more room for accountability and making people accountable for what they should be, and also maybe adding to that authority level kind of in the background, not in a very obvious way, not like signing off something, but to make it visible that yes, these are the 5 steps that we're looking at, and who is that, who is in the approved part, who are we waiting on. It kind of builds on the accountability part as well. This is my interpretation.
Yeah,
It could
yeah.
be wrong, but
No, that's exactly right. You're touching on a few different things. I want to interject, but I still feel I interrupted. Did you finish your thought?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Okay. So signing up for you can have an exercise, right? A team can have an exercise where they're populating the RACI. That's a thing. It's a very common thing. I'm asking a team to have the exact same exercise, but with 5 verbs. Sign up for your verb. Where do you want a literal or figurative seat at the table? With a process flow, a future state process flow, think about what verb you would sign up for. Would you sign up to draft a process flow, review and revise it? Maybe you're in a position to be the approver. So as long as we're executing the 5 verbs, I know our work is durable. We fuse together authority and accountability. It's vulnerable. It's simple. We're not a team that's all over the place. 5 verbs also helps us avoid over documentation, wasteful documentation, because the moment we are unable to assign one of those verbs, we now have won the license to do that work at a pub. So if you think through that, think through any of those 5 verbs and just taking one of them away. If you take away the verb draft, well, then you're not even going to get started. Just go to the pub and have a chat. If you're going to take away the verbs review and revise, it means you drafted something and just sent it out without collaboration. Okay, but that feels like you're not involving enough stakeholders for the more complicated work that you need to do. If you don't have someone assign the verb approve, it means there is no sponsor for that work. It means there's no tiebreaker. There's no micro escalation point, right? The verb approve serves as a sponsor, a micro sponsor for the work. It's a tiebreaker and it's a micro escalation point. But if everyone is scared and no one signs up for the verb approve, well, again, then euthanize the document. It's not worth documenting. This is how you prevent over documentation. If you can't sign up for all 5 verbs, then just do the work over coffee at a pub. The last verb, distribute, we've heard that cliche about documentation that just sits on a shelf. Well, that translates to you just don't have anyone to distribute that documentation to. And we could talk about offline, or it's worth talking about what happens when people who should be receiving the documentation, say a project, something upstream, a project chart or a process flow, but they ignore it. What kind of domino effect does that have for the rest of the project on all of their work when essentially they've stepped away from their seat at the table? We could talk about, well, what does that look like on a project plan when people have disengaged? And it's similar to a violin player just losing track of the symphony. Say, oh, wait, I fell as a violin player, you fell asleep. Well, then don't play, right? Just you're now a spectator with an unusually good seat.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's the 5 verbs is also instrumental in preventing over documentation because it gives us an obvious, ruthlessly clear, pragmatic decision point to say, is what we do worth 5 verbs? If it's not, it's not repeatable, it's not durable, it's just a chat. You'll be done in 60 or 90 minutes.
This is something that I'm personally very curious to know. And it's that you have mentioned muscle memory in project management. So that's something that I would love to know more about. And as a context, my interpretation of this is that for years, all project managers have been told that you need to have a set of skill sets, you need to work with a certain set of tools, templates, forms, this kind of stuff. Is it related to that, or is it something totally different? What is it you call muscle memory in project management?
So it is the 5 verbs.
Oh, great.
It is as simple as
Okay,
that.
yeah.
That's all I'm looking for. So on the dance floor, if you're doing salsa, it's quick, quick, slow, quick, quick, slow. And as long as I have that in every part of my body, I know I'm doing salsa. If I'm going side to side, ba, 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 tap, ba, 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 I'm doing bachata. It's muscle memory. I don't have to think about it. We can think about sports. We could think about a basketball player in the zone, in the groove, on automatic, right? It's a form of automation. It helps us to free up our brain power so that we're not a dancer looking at the floor, right? Because if I'm a
Mhm.
dancer, a BA, a project manager who is constantly looking at their feet, struggling with the mechanics, the
Yeah.
verbs, I'm reinventing the wheel. I'm a team that's all over the place. I've got high variability. It's random. And what I've seen over the course of my career, I've seen these task lists, 30, 40, 50 different verbs. It's like a public dumping ground of
Yeah.
spontaneously conceived work. It reinvents the wheel. What was that lessons learned exercise from weeks or months ago? Everyone has long forgotten that stuff. So muscle memory is what constructs, what habits, right? Culture, my favorite definition of culture are the two words, shared habits. What do we
Mhm.
repeatedly do? What do we systematize? What can we automate as behavior as a team? Five verbs just gives me the rhythm where I just know what we're doing is durable, it's collaborative, it's vulnerable, it has seats at people have seats at the table. It's not overly no one's going to say, "Oh, it's too complex." You can't say that about five verbs. You might say it's too many. Well, then okay, tell me your four verbs. But it's not overly complex. So it's a rhythm. We can establish a rhythm with five verbs. So now, where does my brain power go? Who else? Right? It's about empathy. Who else am I missing in terms of the
Mhm.
team? Who else am I missing in terms of customers? What else? Do we have a blind spot? And my energy goes not to the mechanics, but the empathy within the project charter, the empathy within the process flow, the empathy within the training materials. I just want to master the mechanics. I want to be magnificent at the mundane. I want to be brilliant at the basics, right? The dance lesson last night, I'm good at the fundamentals. That's why I teach. I'm far from the fanciest dancer, most advanced dancer. I teach because I feel I'm very strong at the fundamentals and the basics. And that's what I want for innovation professionals is for us to be brilliant at the basics, fabulous at the fundamentals. Because if we automate that and we have muscle memory, now we can be more creative, more empathetic, more strategic, more curious. And I'm a dancer no longer looking at my feet. I want all of us to be looking at each other on and off the dance floor. Where are our blind spots? Where does our team have a gap? Where else can I contribute? Where's my next challenge? So now, once we master the team mechanics, we can really start thinking about my next challenge, my career growth, because when you hypersimplify your environment, you give confidence to everyone. They're like, well, I can handle this. I'm ready for my next challenge. Where can I contribute upstream? And it's not mysterious where you could contribute upstream. If you want to contribute downstream, we need to minimize mysteriousness of what's downstream. So good leaders reduce the mystery, right? They simplify and they make things transparent so that everyone in the orchestra can keep growing in whatever direction they want their career to go.
Oh, thank you. Actually, while you were making the analogy of performing arts, it just clicked because I remember that as an amateur astronomer, I'm not working with super big telescopes. But what I used to do, and sometimes I still do, is to teach fundamentals of how to work out a telescope and a sky map and how to find your way around the sky, which then helps people to easily navigate. And then they're like, oh, I want to look at that and then find more things about it. And it just leads to maybe finding something new that somebody else hasn't, or just to be able to kind of do it on autopilot, which is something interesting. I hadn't thought of it like this. Thank you. And
It
thinking
is
about project management. Oh, sorry, you go.
well, it's what you're talking about here is set the table leadership, and it's helpful to be able to distinguish bang the table leadership from set the table leadership. And what you're also talking about is self-sufficiency in positioning people so that they can take wings on their own, and more independence and interdependence. Good parents know these skills: bang the table, set the table, navigating messiness, not expecting perfection, and being cool with messiness, but reducing messiness, and then self-sufficiency. So what you just said reminded me of like, what can we steal from the empathetic art of parenting for teamwork? And the good news is we're already casually using the language of parenting, music, dance, theater, improv, right? So all I'm trying to do is magnify the value of these otherwise casual references to music, dance, etc. Give me an inch and I'll take a mile. That's really what this body of work does. Is it says, you use that reference to music. Are we singing from the same? Are we on the same page? Don't stop with these superficial references. Take these valuable culture traits as far as you can, so that your teams do imitate a symphony, imitate a dance couple, imitate good parents.
I'm very sad to say that we're almost out of time. So
I thought we were going 60 minutes, so I'm delighted we've gone longer.
Thank you so much, Robert. I enjoyed it very much, and I would have loved to ask more questions, especially about methodology debt, ruthless grace, and so many other wonderful things that you have introduced. Thanks again, and have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, Mina. Thanks, everyone.